Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
Well, g'day everyone, and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where we unpack the secrets and strategies of scaling a business with the founders who've done it, the industry experts and advisors who can help on the journey, and where we follow a group of first-time founders on their journey as they strive to scale. We've got a very clear goal on this podcast. We're here to really help first-time founders who haven't run larger organizations figure out how to scale successfully so they can fulfill the potential of their business, they can make important decisions with more confidence, and maximize the value they can actually create in the world through that business. I'm your host, Sean Steele. I'm joined today by Richard Katzman from the Kaz Group, which was sort of Kaz.com up until probably 2010, I'm guessing, Richard, is that right?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. And so just a bit of background on the Kaz Group for people who may not know the brand. It was founded in 1926 when Max Katzman, who was your grandfather, right, invented the electric vaporizer. And it became the world's leading global manufacturer of healthcare and home environment appliances like humidifiers and digital thermometers and heaters. And you were selling those under licensed brands as well to the big box and online retailers across 6 continents. And from our earlier conversations, Richard, you took over the reins of this business from your father in 1978, and then over the next 32 years, led the company through a growth stage from 4 mil in rev to 500 mil in revenue before it was sold to Helen of Troy in 2010, who own a whole bunch of other sort of leading beauty and health and home and houseware brands in 2010. And you mentioned to me that some of the key things that were happening in that business were the sort of expansion of product lines that sort of led to this growth, the expansion of product lines, the development of international distribution, and the brand extension licensing that you did with brands like Vicks and Honeywell and Braun. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Can't wait to get stuck in today and to hear about your experiences and learnings as you've been scaling up. Maybe as a way of setting a bit of context for our audience, Richard, could you just give us a bit of a walkthrough of a typical customer, because you had an end customer, the people who are actually buying the products at the end, but who were you guys selling to? Who were your kind of key clients, and what sort of problems did they have, and how did you go about solving those?
Sure. So our customers were for the most part, the big box retailers and the pharmacy chains, and eventually the home centers like Home Depot and Lowe's in the U.S. And so we basically became their category captains for those categories. I think Walmart or Target might have pioneered that concept where they really relied on their leading manufacturer to not only advise them on which of our products to carry, but in some accounts we were responsible for knowing all the market shares and even recommending some of our competitors' products that would be on the shelf, and kind of managing the category for them. And as it got more sophisticated, and I'm sure some of your listeners are also doing this, is to sort of connect right in with their data center. Walmart, in particular, was very strong on that, where they expected you to manage their inventory in your categories as well. So you need to know like what the daily sales were, what each distribution center was doing, and make sure you had enough inventory in this whole supply chain for them, and then also to innovate and to make sure that you were price leader and a feature leader, and just they wanted the captain. Yeah. They
wanted the captain. And so when you think about the competitive landscape, it's not like you were the only people in this business and the only people with this in the playing field. How did you differentiate yourselves from your competitors?
Well, especially when I started in the business, we were a pretty small company and we were competing against Fortune 500 companies. So Sunbeam was a competitor. It's another big global brand. And then there there was one company that was a division of Champion Spark Plug because the DeVilbiss paint sprayers sort of ended up being also a humidifier line, and Gerber Baby Food had a vaporizer humidifier division as well. So we differentiated, I think, because this was, it was a very small part of their companies, and it was 100% of our business. So we obviously cared a lot more about it and put heart and soul into it as a family business, and I think that mattered. Especially when my dad was running the company, pharmacies, there were a lot of independent pharmacies, and they bought from wholesalers, and there might have been, I don't know, 50, 60 wholesalers. A lot of those were family businesses, and thousands of independent pharmacies. By the time we sold the company, there were very, very few independent pharmacies, and there was really Walmart and Target pharmacy were the biggest, and then CV. There were 2 or 3 Walgreens and CVS in the U.S. were the leading pharmacy chains, and you're dealing with maybe a dozen people in the whole country that bought for every single store. So it's very, 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 very different. And being if we had stayed the kind of business that we were when I joined, we wouldn't have been able to compete in that kind of corporate environment, because the whole world sort of shifted away from smaller independent businesses towards the mega corporations.
Wow. Well, you have had some incredible experiences, and so to extract the greatest meat in a short space of time on this podcast, I'd really like to jump straight into some of those key moments. And that we had a bit of a chat offline about a few of these, and one that I thought might be quite instructive for our audience. Many whom I know, end up in front of a customer, have to sell a dream, and then have to run like hell to deliver. You mentioned something about an experience that you had like that with Target. Maybe you can shed a bit of light on what that looked like and how it fueled your growth.
Sure, it's so I think in terms of not know if I qualify as a pure entrepreneur, since I didn't start the business. But I like to think of it as like intrapreneurship, which is, when you grow from 5 to 500, and we were doubling every, 3, 4, 5 years, you really felt like it was maybe 6 or 7 different companies. It was seven plus doublings over that time. And one of the ways we grew the business was, finding neighboring product categories that we weren't in, and then try to develop a product line and solve, try to improve on the category and leverage the relationships and the business that we had and the brand. And we were, doing very well with vaporizers and humidifiers. And one of the products that's, similar on the shelf were electric heating pads. And Sunbeam, I think, had about 90% of the market at that point. And again, it wasn't a huge piece of their business, and they hadn't been innovating or doing anything interesting with the category. Not that it's intrinsically a very interesting category to begin with, but no matter what the product is, there's always something innovative you can do. And so we had the idea to develop some the first electronic controls instead of mechanical controls on it, and made it a little bit safer. And then did some, paid a little bit more attention to the look and feel and the design of both the packaging and the cloth cover and the design of the switch, and just to make it a sleeker, more modern product that'd be more appealing, and hopefully grow the category a little bit. And that all those things were kind of the sweet spot for Target stores, who really put a lot of effort into the design of their stores, and it was very clean and open and modern looking, and they really cared that the products on the shelf also looked like the rest of their store, that it would be very appealing, and the buyer hadn't been very happy with the Sunbeam product. And so we had designed, we were in the middle of our design phase, which didn't quite match up with their planogram timing. And so we had to present before we were really ready with finished product or even finished prototypes. So we had mock-ups of our new switch, and we had front panels of the packaging, and we had cloth swatches of the cloth covers, not even full covers. And we had partnered with, a company that would make the actual heating pad unit for us. And when it came down to decision time, they liked everything we were doing, but they had to make a decision based on what I could show them. And they said, I wish you had a real product that I could decide on instead of just, all this nonsense. And so the only thing I could say was, I said, in a perfect world, we would have all those things, but this is what we have. And if you buy it from us, I guarantee we will deliver on time and make you happy. And they bought it. So
wow.
It was, and then I don't know, 5 or 6 years later, we were the category leader in that category. So
wow.
From zero to leadership. But if at that moment, if we hadn't gotten that account, I don't know that it really would have succeeded.
Yeah,
So
and you can imagine the number of times that we want to be professional in our businesses, and we want to often, sometimes we actually just have to do the best we can to build a minimum viable product, right? And then actually get it out there and get real feedback and get real testing done, which is, is there a customer who's willing to pay you right now for this? If there is, it probably tells you you're on the money. But then you just got to run like hell. And I imagine that's a challenging conversation to go back to the team with. Hey guys, guess what? I know we don't have this product yet, but we do now. We've got money, so we need to get on with it.
I've been involved with software as well, and with software, you can fix it on the fly, and if it crashes, you restart it. With electrical products that get hot and can burn people, and you put vaporizers and humidifiers in babies' rooms, and you have a lot of electrical compliance, and it gets real very quickly. So MVP means a whole another level of stress and pressure, I think. So
absolutely. Can you tell me a bit about brand extensions? It sounds like the licensing, the approach to really building out some of the product lines through brand partnerships or license partnerships was quite a game changer in terms of the trajectory of the business. Can you tell me a bit about why you did that and how did it impact the transformation of the business?
Sure. So in categories like vaporizers and humidifiers, where when I started, there were very, very generic looking products. They weren't even in full color boxes. They weren't really treated like consumer products. They were treated like sort of like home health devices, like you'd find a bedpan or something like that. So one of the things that we did was start to treat it like a consumer product. And so we had the customers were our retailers, but our consumers were the people actually using the product and the ones, that had to make a buying decision in the store. And we thought, we had a nice brand. Pharmacists knew who Kaz was. The retailers did, and a lot of moms that their doctor had said, your kid has the croup or cold or flu, you should get a vaporizer and run it in the room. And they would tell them to get a Kaz, or they would go to, so they knew who, we sort of had brand recognition, but not really. It wasn't a real brand. And to build a true consumer brand is, very, very expensive and time consuming process. And you have to, whether it's advertising or PR or any of those things, it's a serious effort. And our categories really wouldn't support that kind of investment in, making a mega brand. And then one day, and sometimes I think, it's better to be, lucky than good. We got a call from Procter & Gamble, who said they wanted to come and meet with us about Vicks. And, we had done some private label, like, so some of the retailers wanted their name on the box instead of ours. And there wasn't a ton of margin, and it just, I said, well, if they're going to do private label, that makes no sense. He says, oh no, we don't want to do private label, we want to do licensing. And they had the idea that they had done their research, and they knew that vaporizers and Vicks would go very well, because Vicks had their Vapor Rub product. I think they had a statistic that it's in 95% of the households in the U.S. had at least one little jar of Vicks Vapor Rub in their in their home.
I think we all grew up with that product globally, didn't we?
And it's everywhere. And their biggest product, though, was NyQuil, the cough and cold syrup. And they wanted to sell more NyQuil. And the way to do that is to get more facings on the shelf. And they said, well, we have a small cough medicine box on the shelf, but you have a big humidifier and vaporizer. If that was a billboard, if that said Vicks on it, then that would be good for selling more NyQuil. So they said, well, you make we will license you the Vicks brand, so you can make a Vicks vaporizer. You will make it the same way you're making everything now, and you will be doing the manufacturing and the selling and the distribution and the service. We won't touch it. We'll have approval over your packaging and the product, but it's your business, and you just pay us a royalty for that. And we didn't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea, because nobody had done brands or licensing in products like this. So we'll give it a try, and we carefully picked a model and a price point that wouldn't cannibalize our existing sales, because we didn't want to lose what we had if it didn't work out, and because we'd be paying this royalty and we'd be making even less than we were making before. And so from the first meeting until the first shipment was only 11 months, and that included negotiating the first license agreement that Procter & Gamble had done, and designing a fresh design for this, and designing the package and getting it all done. And we thought if we did 100,000 units, that would have been a successful project. And it was, be careful what you wish for, because if we could have made 2 million, we would have sold every single piece.
Wow.
Whereas before, I'd make a sales call on a big retailer, and it would be, you'd negotiate over a nickel or a dime in your price, and fighting, against your competitors, want to keep this business. And that, as soon as we showed that product to the retailers, they didn't ask even how much it was. I said, sure, yeah, that's obvious, we'll take that. And so it was instantly the number one product in the category. And from there, we just kept adding Vicks, new models of different Vicks products each year, and they instantly were the leaders in their category. And it was so successful that then they came to us and said, we want to do Vicks thermometers. And we didn't know if that was a good idea, and we hadn't been making thermometers. So we tried it, and within a couple of years, we were the leading branded digital thermometer manufacturer in the
And when
country.
you mentioned, you were already in the category. You were like, well, I'll take a bet on this, but I don't want to lose my existing business. If it doesn't work, I need to be able to roll back to what I have. Did you keep both products in the category? Did you sort of position the other product at a different price point with this kind of elevated brand, and keep your brand in there for a period of time, or sort of in perpetuity? What did you do with the existing one?
Yeah, so we were really nervous in the beginning. So we said, the Kaz brand will be the entry price point and the best. But the good, better, best strategy will make the better the Vicks product. And so we tried it, and it was, just blew everything else away. And then over the years, we had Kaz and Vicks, and that ratio just went from, zero this way to zero that way. And by the time we sold the business, I don't believe we were selling anything under the Kaz brand anymore.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you type in Kaz.com now, it goes straight to
Helen of Troy.
to their Vicks page and
Yeah.
Honeywell page.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. And so in a transformation from a $4 million business to a $500 million business, obviously the business is growing from a people perspective. And so, some of the big dial changes are often individuals, you had certain talent or capability that you had to bring in at different stages. Who were when you sort of think back, what were the kind of key hires that you remember? Like maybe the first one that really just jumps out, a kind of key hire that really changed things because they brought a capability that perhaps you didn't have in the business and was necessary to be able to shift the business to the next level?
Sure. So there were several. I think the first real, so when my dad was running the business, he was very much a do-it-yourself. He liked to do the production, everything from production planning and inventory to sales, product design. Worked with the banks on revolving credit lines, all those things, and didn't really have any what you'd call hired gun professional managers in the company. And then I came in, and my first job was to build our first computer system, and I did that. I started to learn the business, and I realized I started getting involved with various all the different departments. So one of the first hires we made was a professional sales manager, that VP of sales, that could really be there, work with our sales reps and work with the retailers on a much more hands-on basis, because it was becoming a year-round business. My dad would make one sales call in the beginning of the year and then never see them again till the following year, and that wouldn't fly anymore. And that sort of started to set the stage for building a professional team. And probably the most transformational hire was a gentleman that we hired. He had been working in some big pharma companies, and he came in as our VP of marketing. And that was a big deal because he was used to a pretty high level compensation package that included stock, and he was working for public companies, and that's pretty standard in public companies, that you'd get options or, a stock package that would vest over time. And we were a private company, family held, no outside shareholders. And, we developed a phantom stock program, just so we can make that higher. And that became a pretty powerful, part of the compensation package, because, when you hire top people, they want some equity in the business. And he just brought a whole new level of professionalism to the marketing, and then, and became a marketing driven company where marketing drove product development and customer relationships and kind of knit the whole thing together. And I give him a tremendous amount of credit for, he came in right about when we were doing, right after we did the VIX deal, which was, and that actually was not just good for our sales and our bottom line. The VIX deal put us on the map where people like this guy Bob would really want to work in the company, because he knew he had worked at P&G, and then he had worked at I think it was maybe Pfizer or one of the another big company, and he understood the brand a lot more than even I did at that point, and he knew what he could do with it if he came into the business. So it was so the stock thing was important, but also having that license, I think, was a recruiting aid at that time too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about funding for growth? One of the things that's, of course, the most challenging for many businesses, depending on their kind of working capital and cash flow profile, is how do they fund a growth that, you had a business that was on average growing at, I think sort of 16 to 20% a year, year on year. So, you have to be able to fund the growth, and some businesses do a great job in optimizing the cash flow so they can fund it themselves. Other people need to take on capital. Tell me a bit about how you thought about capital and how you funded your growth story.
Sure. So for working capital over the years, we really just worked with a bank line, a revolving credit line. It was a seasonal business. So during the summer, when we were building inventory and shipping to to the retailers, that would be kind of the high water mark of when we would, pull down, close to the max on that line. And then cash started coming in the fall, and or it gets reverse in your your hemisphere. Okay. And that worked for many years. And then for capital needs, we were a prime manufacturer for most of the time I was there. So we had a factory in upstate New York. We expanded the buildings a couple of times. We built some additions, and we eventually put a whole plastic molding operation in there. And so for that, we had some public-private packages that they'd give us some tax incentives and some other things. So it wasn't really a cash injection. So we needed to come up with the cash ourselves on those things. So we worked with some of the equipment. We're on leases. There's a lot of things you can do to sort of spread out the payments on capital expenses. So we didn't really take in any outside money until we did a big acquisition. This was in 2002. We acquired the Honeywell Consumer Products division. So that was their humidifier line. They were the biggest in air cleaners, and then heaters and fans also. So they had 4 product categories. Then they had sales and offices in Europe and in Asia. So it was a collection of different divisions, offices, a couple of factories that came with it, a distribution center, and we needed to bring in some outside capital for that. So we partnered with a private equity firm, Center Partners, and that became a good relationship. And it was slightly unusual in that most private equity deals, they want to take a control interest in the business, and they only took a 20% interest in our. That was.
And did they come in with a sort of defined, mandate about how long they would stick around and when they wanted to get out?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it was pretty typical of they had a 5 to 7 year time horizon. Unfortunately, in the middle of that time horizon, kind of the world economy collapsed, and we had to hunker down a little bit. But so it went. They didn't get out until we sold the business in 2011. But so it was 9 years. They did pretty well. I mean, they did like 2.5x, I guess, but it was spread over a longer period of time. So their IRR wasn't a home run, but the money on money was good.
Yeah, absolutely. So during that period, were there any, I'm interested in, quite often entrepreneurs find it might be particular books that have really influenced kind of key decisions they made, or frameworks or methodologies or tools that they actually found quite instructive or helpful in thinking about how to build their organization. What influenced you from that perspective as you grew the business?
Great question. There were a couple of things come to mind. One was, I guess we at one point, I'll back up a little. I'd say the most influential, thought injections I've had in the business weren't necessarily from books, but it was from my participation in Young Presidents Organization, YPO, which is a large global organization of company presidents and CEOs. And they have events and seminars and small groups that you meet with, just a group of peers. And listening and to stories I'd hear there, or speakers that we'd bring in, became very influential. So I'd go to one event, and I'd hear somebody talking about what they were. I remember it was they had an event at Toyota in Kentucky, where they were talking about their how they manage their quality process, and I hadn't really studied that area of the business as much, and it was really eye-opening. I remember they had one of their VPs at the Toyota plant had worked in a General Motors plant before, and he helped them design this new plant that they recruited him. They're building this brand new plant in Kentucky, and he's going through all the drawings. He's going to tell them, how to do it. And he realizes, and he says, "Oh, this looks great, but you're missing a really important area in this plant. I only see this tiny little area for rework, and you need big area for rework. The cars come off the line, and then you inspect them, and you find where the things that need to be fixed on it, the lights that don't go on and the doors that don't close right, and you got to fix that." And they say, "Oh, no, we don't do it that way. We do it on the line. And if the thing doesn't fit, they stop the whole line and they fix it there. And then when it comes off, it works." And he was saying that can never work. And then of course, they built the plant, and he's like, now he's a convert, and he was, bragging about how well that they do it. And so from there, we brought in a quality consultant, and I think it really made a difference in not just how we made product, but also how we spent a lot of time on processes, how to have better meetings, and it was a mindset that I think I was able to bring in. Another speaker I heard that had wasn't so much, it was sort of a confirmation of something. So it was Tony Hsieh, who tragically passed away last year. He was the founder of Zappos, the big shoe retailer, and he had their company was very customer service focused. So even though they're an online retailer, they have an 800 number on every page, and they actually want you to call them, unlike just about every other online retailer. And his thinking was, we have you on the phone for 11 minutes or whatever, and if we do a good job there, we'll have you forever. And so they only hired people that really were customer service oriented. And so they had two different hiring processes. They'd interview for all the typical skill set and experience and all that. And if you were qualified, you went into the next round of screening, and they'd ask you weird questions like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how lucky are you? And they say, I don't know, 1 is like, 10 is like, I don't know, good things just happen, and 1 is, I don't know, no matter what, like nothing works out.
Me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then some people answer that, and then a couple of questions later, they give them a section of a newspaper, and they say, just all we want you to do is count the number of pictures in this newspaper. And they like, okay, they're testing my attention to detail or something. So they start counting the pictures, and then on the third page or something, it's a fake newspaper, and one of the headlines on one of the stories is, "You can stop counting now. There's 31 pictures." And you can write down 31, hand it in, you're done. And some of the people do that, and other ones go through the whole thing to the very end and count all the pictures and write it. And then he said, we found that there's a correlation. Like the people who said they were lucky also read that headline and stopped counting. And so, so my moral from that is, or my lesson was similar to the VIX thing. You take the meeting. You never know what's gonna happen, and you can come up with a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. But especially in a fast-growing business, those plans, typically things happen and new opportunities come up, and that are usually things you couldn't foresee, or often are things you couldn't foresee. You can't foresee when Honeywell's going to want to sell a division, and that tripled the size of our business at that point. You can't foresee when someone's going to call you and want to offer a license, or you see some new product or technology that's around. So yes, you can plan, but my experience has been the kind of plans that you make with 3-year plans, 5-year plans tend to be very incremental thinking, and by the time you get there, the world has moved on. And like if you could be Nokia coming up with, like, here's my new brick phone, with the, or saying like, we own the whole cellular phone market. Like, we're going to do different colors, and we're going to do cool shapes. Yeah. And they didn't even see iPhone coming, and didn't think it was going to be anything. So,
I think the days of the set and forget plan are sort of long gone, aren't they?
Exactly. And even in Apple's history, like Steve Jobs, he was just on a tour at Xerox and he saw the Xerox machine that was the first one with a graphic user interface. And that became ultimately the Mac interface, which ultimately became Windows. I don't think in the morning when he woke up, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to reinvent, the graphic interface.
Mm. And I think it's such a great illustrative example of the need to be able to balance the dichotomy at the same time of having 100% certainty that you're going to succeed as a team and with your business and that you'll make it to somewhere that's positive no matter what. And yet at the same time, at exactly the same time, retain the vulnerability and the humility to be wrong, to be open, to find ideas, to change tack, to adapt and change and be flexible. And that sort of infinite flexibility without being random, but the sort of the openness to being flexible and not becoming, well, I've succeeded so far, so I clearly am the smartest person in the room and therefore I know exactly where we should be going. That's, it's a sort of a dichotomy that every entrepreneur or entrepreneur has to balance at the same time, I think. In the context of your period, you would have had some really challenging times. I'm interested in what you would consider one of your biggest mistakes or failures, whatever sort of language you might use, for yourself as a leader or with the business. What were one of the biggest mistakes and what did it sort of almost cost you, and what did you learn from that?
Two things. I have probably the biggest thing with that happened that risked the company. We were moving along with the integration of the Honeywell business, and trying to figure out which parts of it were working and which weren't. And we knew when we bought the business that there were parts that needed to be closed, and it wasn't a secret. They marketed it as a troubled company, and for what it eventually sold for, it was a fixer-upper for sure. So we're in that process, and and we hired fresh management team in Europe, because we didn't have an office in Europe, and now all of a sudden we had a pretty large office there. And in Italy, they had hired a new general manager to run that business, and he started putting up big numbers on air conditioner sales, and it's a specialized market. These are the sort of the split units that not window units, and
when you say putting up, do you mean sort of forecasting big numbers or delivering big numbers?
He was selling a lot of units, okay, and he had a plan, and he's saying there's low hanging fruit. We're gonna the Honeywell brand is strong, and the air conditioner market's big here, and we can do a great job. And so we invested in a lot of inventory, and spent a lot of time in China working with the manufacturers there to develop the right products. And it turned out that he was just full of it. And we ended up not selling units, owning a lot of units, and these are very they were a lot more expensive than most of the products that we made. You could fit a container of digital thermometers might be 100,000 thermometers or so, or a lot. Air conditioners are large, they take up a lot of room, they have a lot of inventory, and so we got way over leveraged there, and it kind of sucked down all the numbers in the company for a year or so. And you don't want to, you're not allowed to run out of cash. That's the worst thing you can do.
Not a good scenario.
And we had a lot of cash tied up there. So that was, and so the lesson is, just don't take people's word for it. And I would say and my dad would say this too. He said his biggest disappointments in business were always people that he trusted or that he gave too much trust to without really doing the diligence and holding people, making sure that they were doing what they said they were doing. I would say the corollary to that is probably the biggest joys I've had in the business are from the people I worked with there. So, that might have been a reason he didn't hire great people, because he was afraid of giving people authority. I'd much rather err on the other side and you have a great team, which is what we, ended up having.
It's almost a sort of, it's not a either or, is it? It's an and, it's sort of chicken and fish, not chicken or fish, in that you need to be able to trust people and empower them. And you also need to have appropriate governance and checks and balances so that, you don't miss stuff. And that doesn't mean that you're not trusting. It just means that you can trust them and empower them. And you can also have visibility and transparency and checks and balances to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks.
And it's not so much like a mistake, I don't think, but in terms of like sad parts of the business, also were people things where you're mentioning before the balance of running a tight ship, but also being open to new ideas. And so if you have the right chemistry with your senior team, you can come in and you go to some YPO seminar and you say, oh, we're going to do this today, and they weren't expecting that. And they hate when you go to these conventions or whatever, because they know you're going to come back with
lots of ideas,
some nonsense. And so to have trust the other way, where they trust you as the steward of the business or the captain or whatever, that you can bring in new ideas, that they're going to listen to them and consider them and help you execute. And then also, if they think it's a terrible idea, that they have the relationship to push back and keep you from making a big mistake. And back to so that made it even harder when one of the tough parts about growing a business over a long run. And I was saying before, it's like having several different businesses, several different careers almost in the same business. Is the team that you build at 50 million to 100 million is no longer the team that can run a $300 million global business. And, we had to make changes there that were very painful certainly for them and for me personally, because I had, friends that really made my career and helped the company, that no longer were the right people for the roles that they were in that business. And if it's any consolation to them, ultimately that was me, because when we got to 500, I was not the right person to run that business. I'm much more, whether it's entrepreneurial, or just wanting to swing for the fences every now and then, and you get outside investors, and you get a big company, and you get lots of levels of management, and you have different cultures and different areas that came from different places, and that was not my strength to knit all that together. But,
and did you find that was the same experience in building from when it was, say 4 to 10 or 4 to 15 and 50 to 100, i.e. the team that was there for the sort of 4 to 15 journey was not also the same team that could take it to 50 or 100, making those changes all the way through, right?
Yeah. Whether it's your bookkeeper, or somebody who's a great bookkeeper or controller, at the small company can't be a CFO, and so you end up, you start hiring above long-time people, which is awkward and not a great thing to do. But again, if you have the relationship and the trust, they will support that.
I think there's an opportunity to say to people that, you're at some stage, if the business goes really well, the company is likely to grow around you. And that doesn't mean that you can't continue to grow individually and thrive in the company, but it just may not mean that you naturally take on the next level up or the next level up or the next level up, because actually we need people who've been to the stage that we're trying to get to before to help lead us to that stage. And if you haven't done that, that's not a failure on your part. It's just an experience set. And that's why different people have different gigs.
Exactly.
When you think about some of those most challenging periods, who did you tend to lean on? Who was your sort of go-to? Was it colleagues in your YPO forum or small groups, or was it your partner, your family? Like, who did you tend to lean on when times got tough?
Good question too.
And I ask that specifically because quite often it's a pretty lonely job when you're at the top. You don't always have a big remit of people that you can actually confide in about what's going on, because there's only some things that you can talk to with the rest of your business, and quite often that just means you wear a lot of this sort of personal burden of everybody else's stuff and your worries for everyone else.
Well, that is actually the origin story of YPO, which was a young guy. His dad, he was in a family business, and the dad suddenly died suddenly, and all of a sudden he's, probably in his late 20s, early 30s, and he's running a substantial business, and he didn't have any peers that he could share these issues, problems, triumphs, whatever. So they created YPO to be better presidents through education and idea exchange. And one of the core elements of YPO are these forums where you have 10 or 12 peers that you meet monthly with total confidentiality, and you can share these issues. And as much as we like to think we're the only ones who've ever experienced such a horrible thing happening in our business, chances are someone in in that room also has had something similar and can tell you how they got through it or what they did. And that extends not just to the business part, but also to family and relationships. Your kids, you can, you share the good times and the bad times, and there are people who that's the only part of YPO that they participate in, and it's been good. So, and YPO is businesses of a certain size, but there's YEO for smaller businesses. So probably, the best advice I could give to people who are, on the path that the scale up path is to find one of these peer group organizations, because, it's people with similar experiences will, it's good to hear that and to see how they handled it. And then, we did quite a few acquisitions and the licensing, and, it was meeting people, at some of these events. And I remember I'm saying, like, they're telling stories about what they're doing with their businesses. And I'm at first I'm like, I was pretty young and inexperienced then, because I'd only been in a family business. And I think, wow, that's very impressive. And then I'd get to know them a little better and say, I'm as smart as these people, I can do that too. And that inspired me to want to do, grow the business and try different things. And, have the, we did kind of bet the farm on the Honeywell acquisition, and it was a big move. But I knew that we could make it work. But I think it was seeing how people had built very large companies in a variety of different ways, and that they weren't superheroes; they were peers. Now, and that said, I did meet a couple of superheroes, and that were just so smart and accomplished, and that was inspiring. And but you realize, like, that's a very small percentage, and most of the people that are building very nice organizations and businesses and coming up with great ideas are just, they're just like you. You can do that.
Yep. And they still have family issues, and they still have personal issues.
Yeah.
I have a segment that I ask all guests this question, Richard, and the segment is called Above All Else. So I want you to imagine, sort of take yourself out into the future. I mean, you've already had an incredible career to date, but imagine, you're sort of in your later yearning years. You've got a lot of wisdom, tied up in that brain, and you've achieved all the things that you wanted. You've started all the businesses that you wanted, and you feel like you've given what you'd hoped. And the CEO of a global community, the world's largest global community of, founders that are probably still, sub 10 million, first-time founders, haven't built a large organization before, and they're sort of hungry and curious and open to insight. And she offers you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to share your wisdom. And she asks you for your 3 above all else's. So she asks you to finish this sentence. the three things, above all else, the three things that you must get right as a founder if you want to scale are, what would be your three things? The three things that you must get right as a founder if you want to scale.
I think one is that you really believe in your mission. So I think I've been thinking back when I was growing up in the company and leading the company. I felt like it was the most important company in the world, and that sounds so ridiculously naive now, but I really believed it. I felt like we were making healthcare products and doing good things, and we had good building careers for people, and it was, I felt much like we were much bigger. It was like the little dog that, like barks at the big, just goes down the street barking at the big dogs, thinking that, he's the big dog too. So I think that that belief in that what you're doing is important is essential. And then we've been talking about it. The people that you surround yourself with are make or break. And one thing that I do believe in, and is that you try to hire people that are 2 levels above the job that you're hiring them for. That they can, if you're going to hire a vice president, they should be able to be president someday. Or if you're hiring a bookkeeper, they can make it to controller. Or if you're hiring somebody, an hourly worker on the line, that they might be able to make it to supervisor or manager. And you find people who not everybody wants to do that, but screening for the talent and the personality and the fit. And then the third thing is don't run out of cash. It seems so obvious, I mean, yeah. I've been doing a lot of angel investing, and all these businesses you're running, they all are losing so much money, and we made money every year growing up, and that's like so old fashioned. Yeah. You're saying how do you get outside capital? So we were profitable. Like, how
so show me a cash flow statement. Why would I need one of those? Why not just know that it's negative?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I was an investor in one business, and he's so focused on growing the top line, and he has a negative contribution margin on the business, and so like it's costing him more money to get the sales than they're generating in profit. That's before all the other expenses in the business, and I'm just saying that doesn't make any sense to me. And there's people telling him it makes a lot of sense, and so it might be just me, but if you can keep raising out, round after round of capital, great, good for you. You're going to keep getting diluted, and I've seen businesses that they have a hot new technology or software or market or something happens, and they get a big up round, and they get greedy and they take huge valuation for it, and then when they get to their next round, they haven't, it has to be a down round or flat, and that gets people grumpy, or your former investors. So it's not just being glib about the cash thing, but it's I think having a plan for knowing where ultimately where the value proposition of your business is, and doesn't have to be, if it's a fast growing startup, it's not going to be profitable right away, but there needs to be some sort of rational plan as to why if you want to exit the business, and you're going to have to convince somebody that it is worth that, and ultimately businesses ultimately will be valued on their profitability.
At some point, yeah. It's some of the stories of some of the businesses that are still on big revenue valuations and still don't make any money, but at some point this thing's going to turn profitable. I promise. And some of them have big market caps.
Yeah, well, you can issue a token that doesn't do anything.
That's right. Yeah,
that's right. So probably the fourth thing would be don't listen to me on these things, because I'm clearly wrong about that.
I think it's incredibly instructive for for, I meet many businesses that are in a space where they absolutely are profitable and they should be doing cash flow planning, but they're not doing cash flow planning. And they just haven't had that management discipline before. They've never been exposed to it before, but it's incredibly important, especially if they're going to start growing quickly or growing faster. They've got to know that they can actually be able to afford that, because as you said, you turn off the cash tap and you get problems. Well, they're incredibly...
And that can include, of course, raising your additional rounds or going public or whatever. So I don't want to make it sound like... It's
about the forward visibility, so you can plan for that, right? And knowing when you're going to run out, knowing when you need to have those raises. Right.
So as sort of, down on 3-year plans and 5-year plans, as I was saying before, that doesn't apply to the cash plan. I wanted to
have a plan for cash.
I always wanted to be able to make payroll.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, those have been incredibly instructive, Richard, and I really I value your time and what you've shared with us today. I'd really like to acknowledge you. I mean, this is a business that you had some incredible generational history when you took the helm. So I'm sure that also came with its own pressure and its own sort of constraints and challenges in the early days. And then for you to be able to transform that company from 4 or 5 mil to 500 through some really clear big strategic moves, some that you didn't really plan out and some but you recognized an opportunity and you went after it. That's as important as being able to identify the opportunities in the first place, right? And being able to hustle and align a team and get stuff done and get it delivered and at the right quality. And so I think you're I'd just like to acknowledge the way that you've led this company to continue to lead a business over that period of change, and that size change over 32 years meant that you had to reinvent yourself. To your point, you had 5 or 6 or 7 careers over that time, which meant you had to keep leveling up on your own. So I really acknowledge you for the journey, and thank you very much for sharing that with our audience. How can people get in touch with you if they wanted to follow what you're doing? Where do they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay, check you out on LinkedIn.
Message me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to hear.
No problems at all.
Great.
That's wonderful.
It was a fun ride. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. A huge thanks to Richard Katzman. And a couple of things before you go. If you got value from today's podcast, please leave us a review on Apple iTunes. It gives our team a big thrill. And of course, it helps other people find the podcast like yourself. Feel free to jump to the website, scaleupspodcast.com. If you pop your email in there, you will be first to know when new episodes drop or free tools and resources that are under development get released. If you've got questions about your own business and how to, elements of how to scale up your own business, and you'd like myself or guests like Richard to address those questions, please jump on the website, use the SpeakPipe widget on the right-hand side of the page. You can leave a question straight from your phone via audio about scaling. If you are more of a social animal, feel free to follow us on the socials on whatever your favorite platform is at ScaleUps Podcast. And there are full episodes available by video on YouTube. But before I go, please remember the only thing, these are it's a challenging approach, scaling a business. Scaling is hard. But the only thing that guarantees that you're not going to scale is actually giving up. So you have to stay unshakable in your faith, but remain flexible in your approach, as you've heard today from Richard. So you've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm Sean Steele. Look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks very much. And thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Sean.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalized advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.